Hello. Today we're going to see a novel by Joseph Conrad, Lord Jim. I'm going to introduce it, then we'll listen to the reading, some passages, and an analysis will follow. Before we start, let's see some of his masterpieces. For example, The Secret Agent. This is a novel quite different from the usual stories of Conrad because it's not set at sea. It's not a travel at sea. It's set in land. And it's a story basically of terrorism. And also it deals with the exploitation of those who are the most vulnerable. In this case, a person who has learning difficulty. Another, maybe his masterpiece, is Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness is the story of European colonization of Africa. When we think of Africa, black Africa, we think of, imagine a savage place. But in the story we understand that the white European who should bring civilization to Africa are instead those who exploit, who have no heart. Their heart is dark. There's cruelty, and instead the native Africans, the black people, are instead innocent and used by the white men. This story became quite famous, and there's also a rendering film called Apocalypse Now by Francis Coppola. He retells the story, but this time, instead of Africa, is in Vietnam, when the Americans attacked Vietnam. There was the Vietnam War. Also, in this case, the Americans, who should bring civilization and so on, they show their cruelty when they attack innocent people in villages. Let's see about Lord Jim. In this image you can see basically the three moments of the story of Jim. First of all, Jim as a young man, he always dreams of being a hero at sea, but he has never faced any danger. Then he becomes an officer on a ship, the Patna, a ship that is carrying Muslim pilgrims to Mecca, but at a certain point the ship is something underwater and there is a leak. Some water begins to flow inside the ship, and there is also a storm, a terrible storm approaching, big waves, strong wind, and the crew decide to abandon the ship, leaving the passengers, hundreds of passengers inside the ship. Jim decides he does not know how to jump from the ship, abandon the ship, but the partner does not sink, and there is arrested. There's an inquiry, and at the end of the inquiry, Jim is stripped of his officer's certification, and he meets Marlowe. Marlowe is the second narrator. And in the third part, he goes to a tropical island and lives there, and he becomes a hero there, a real hero, because he helps the inhabitants to fight an attack from the outside. And now his dream to help people become somebody special becomes a reality. Now, it's very important, many stories by Conrad are centered on a ship. Now, a ship is like a microcosm. Imagine you want to carry out a scientific experiment. For example, I don't know, you want to determine the law of gravity. If you try to do it outside, maybe there's wind, maybe there are other factors that can influence your experiment. But if you recreate inside a closed laboratory, inside a room, you eliminate all the possible interferences, all the external factors. In the same way, a ship is an enclosed space. They are not the typical influences of society, and so you can see in its essence the real nature of things. What are the influences? You can find in his works use of symbols, many symbols, as we're going to see. Relativism, that is, everything is relative, it depends on the point of view. Freud, especially in Heart of Darkness. And then also experimentation in the narrative, in telling a story. So what are the main themes of Lord Jim? First of all, every person sees reality according to his own point of view. That is, each point of view is fragmented. And we're going to see this from when the two narratives, the one of Jim and the one of Marlowe, are put one next to the other. And we see that each one has a fragmented perception of reality. So there are multiple points of view. And this relativity, the fact that it is not one absolute description of life or reality, is also seen in the use of language that sometimes is not very precise. Conrad believes that we really show who we are in a moment of crisis. And also in this story, there is a moment of crisis when he jumps from the ship and when in the end he fights for the freedom of the island. Basically, another thing is isolation. As he said, we live as we dream alone. But because we are alone, we need to have some rules. We must establish some personal code of behavior, some rules we have to follow. In origin, we have our hero, let's say, starts a journey of self-discovery. First of all, he is cut out from his social environment and is tested in isolation. There's nobody that can help him. He's alone. This is typical of Conrad because, as I told you before, he creates a microcosmos where he can experiment, he can see, he can test the real nature of ourselves. So let's talk about Lord Jim. We know only this person as Jim. In the story you will hear the other sailors calling him George, but his real name is Jim. So he's the first officer on a ship called Patna. In the following passages, we're going to see, Jim relives his story, the story of the fatal jump from the ship when he abandoned the pilgrims, hundreds of people inside the ship to save his life.
I could hear them knocking about down there, and a voice as if crying up a shaft called out, "George!" Then the three voices together raised a yell. They came to me separately. One bleated, another screamed, one howled. Ugh! He shivered a little, and I beheld him rise slowly, as if a steady hand from above had been pulling him out of the chair by his hair. Up, slowly, to his full height, and when his knees had locked stiff, the hand let him go, and he swayed a little on his feet. There was a suggestion of awful stillness in his face, in his movements, in his very voice, when he said, "They shouted." And involuntarily I pricked up my ears for the ghost of that shout that would be heard directly through the false effect of silence.
This text, what you see here is divided in two parts. The first part in black, the other in blue. Notice the sound, the narrator. I could hear them knocking about down there. So the first I is Jim speaking about his story. He tells us that he's at this moment is on top of the partner of the ship, and he could hear from inside the ship the voices of the pilgrims praying, calling for help. And then he heard also a voice calling out his name, George. Then other voices of other people, and then he heard also the voices of some other members of the crew calling him. And notice how these voices are described. One bleated, another screamed, and one howled. So different qualities in the voice. This part is basically on hearing. The most important input, physical sensation, is hearing sounds, different kinds of sound. Don't forget that he's terrified. He's imagining himself already not able to manage this crisis, to overcome this crisis, to find a way out, to save everything, himself and the passengers and the ship. And so he's particularly sensitive. He can hear different kinds of sounds from inside the ship and from outside the ship. The second paragraph is in blue. And now this is from Marlowe. Marlowe is in front of Jim and is listening to his story. And so he describes, he says this he is Jim. So who's speaking now is Marlowe, and describing Jim. You see, he says that when he told about the voices, he tried to steady himself because he was still shaking, remembering the moment. As you can see, he tries to stand up, but he's not stable. And then he's trying to remember exactly the sensation, to live it again. They shouted, Jim said. Marlowe, involuntarily, it feels a sort of empathy, and he almost tried to pick his ears, to touch his ears, to remove from his ears the ghost of the sound that Jim was trying to recreate.
"There were 800 people in that ship," he said, impaling me to the back of my seat with an awful blank stare. 800 living people, and they were yelling after one dead man to come down and be saved. "Jump, George! Jump! Oh, jump!" I stood by with my hand on the davit. I was very quiet. It had come over pitch dark. You could see neither sky nor sea. I heard the boat alongside go bump, bump, and not another sound down there for a while, but the ship under me was full of talking noises. Suddenly the skipper howled, "Mein Gott! The squall! The squall! Shove off!" With the first hiss of rain and the first gust of wind they screamed, "Jump, George! We'll catch you! Jump!" The ship began a slow plunge. The rain swept over her like a broken sea. My cap flew off my head. My breath was driven back into my throat. I heard, as if I had been on the top of a tower, another wild screech, "George! Oh, jump!" She was going down, down, head first under me.
800 people and 800 Muslims, pilgrims, praying, asking him to help them, asking him not to abandon them, on the one hand. On the other hand, there were the other sailors telling him, calling him, jump, telling him to jump, to abandon the ship. And this is, now he moves to visual sensations. It had come over pitch dark. It was completely dark now. You could see neither sky nor sea. So this is not just a description, it's a symbolical description. If you could not see a difference between the sea and the sky, it meant you had nowhere to orientate yourself. In a way, it was difficult to, symbolically, to see what was good or not appropriate, not right to do at the moment. He was all confused. And then in his mind, there are again talking noises. Everybody's talking, and all is coming to him. And then there was a big gust of wind, and so the sailors were in a hurry because there was the possibility that the little boat could be submerged by the waves and because of the wind. And so they said, "Hurry up, we'll catch up. Hurry up, George, jump. We'll catch you. We'll take care of you." He had the sensation that the ship is she, was going down, was beginning to sink underwater, under himself. And this was almost the last drop, the last thing that made him, that created a climax, intense, that contributed to the confusion in his mind. Marlowe describes the moment, no words, just the moments of Jim.
He raised his hand deliberately to his face, and made picking motions with his fingers as though he had been bothered with cobwebs, and afterwards he looked into the open palm for quite half a second before he blurted out, "I had jumped." He checked himself, averted his gaze. "It seems," he added. His clear blue eyes turned to me with a piteous stare, and looking at him standing before me, dumbfounded and hurt, I was oppressed by a sad sense of resigned wisdom, mingled with the amused and profound pity of an old man helpless before a childish disaster. "Looks like it," I muttered.
Still confused. It's like you were trying to remove a cobweb, a spider, the web of a spider, from his mind, to make space, to see clearly. And then Jim says, "I had jumped." It seems. One moment it was on top of the ship, listening to the voices, seeing darkness only. And then he found himself on the little boat at the bottom of the ship. So he could not remember having decided to jump. One moment he was on top of the boat, the other moment he was at the bottom, inside the boat, the little boat. And Marlowe describes his look, the look you can see in Jim. It was a piteous stare. Jim was looking at Marlowe in a pitiful way, really desolate. He was dumbfounded, confused, and hurt. There was a lot of pain in himself. And there was a sense of resigned wisdom. We'll come back to this. Resigned wisdom. And then, looks like it. So this is a confirmation of the fact that he did not remember jumping. One moment. So, the most important moment in his life, the most important choice to jump or not to jump, was it happened without he being aware of that. In a way, he did not decide. He found himself after, with the choice already taken. He had already abandoned the ship when he realized that he had done that. And this says a lot about the human mind.
I knew nothing about it till I looked up, he explained hastily. And that's possible, too. You had to listen to him as you would to a small boy in trouble. He didn't know. It had happened somehow. It would never happen again. He had landed partly on somebody and fallen across a thwart. He felt as though all his ribs on his left side must be broken. Then he rolled over and saw vaguely the ship he had deserted uprising above him, with the red sidelight glowing large in the rain like a fire on the brow of a hill seen through a mist. She seemed higher than a wall. She loomed like a cliff over the boat. I wished I could die, he cried. There was no going back. It was as if I had jumped into a well, into an everlasting deep hole.
He was like a small boy who had done something wrong, and now he doesn't know what to do to make it up, to repair what he had broken. He had fallen on the boat, and then he's still confused, and then he tried to understand where he was and what had happened. And here are the last words of Jim. The moment I turned and watched towards the sky, I could see the ship. She seemed higher than a wall. No, a wall is something you cannot overcome. It's a limit. And she loomed like a cliff over the boat. A cliff is a high rock. You cannot go up there. You cannot climb it. I wished I could die. Why? Because it was the end of his dream. It's the end of his life. And unfortunately, there was no going back. He could not, climb again on top of the ship. The boat was already leaving the area, was escaping from the apparently sinking ship. And then he says, it was as if I had jumped into a well. A well is a hole, big hole, into an everlasting deep hole. A hole that never ended. So you jump into a black hole underground and you never stop falling down. Here are some images from a film that retells the story of Lord Jim. Here you see the moment when Jim goes inside the ship, and he finds there's water coming inside the interior of the ship. And at that moment, he's not rational. His imagination, his fear, he's so frightened that he sees what is not still there. He sees already the ship sinking, and he's sort of in a fit of panic. And then there are the 800 pilgrims, and they are, of course, nervous because they fear they're going to sink. But Marlowe does something important here. As you know, when he became an officer, he made an oath. He promised to follow his honor. He was responsible for the crew and for the passengers of the ship. Don't remember that the captain of the ship should be the last one to abandon the vessel, the ship. So when he jumped, he broke his word, his promise to the Lord. But also here, in this case, he promised this Imam, the leader of the pilgrims. Then after this moment, Jim said, promised the Imam, all the pilgrims, that he would save them. So when he jumped, in a way, he also went against this promise to hundreds of people. He had done explicitly. So here there's a strong wind, it's dark, it's raining, and he's alone. The other sailors have already jumped. They are inside the boat, and he's alone. He doesn't know what to do, and he's, as you can see from his face, he's terrified. He hears voices from inside the ship, the pilgrim, and then he looks at the boat that is below the ship, and the people there say, jump, hurry, jump. So he's confused. There are voices everywhere. On one side, the voices, they're reminding that he has promised to save them. On the other, the sailors who have already abandoned the ship, they are telling him, hurry up, because if we continue to stay here, we will go underwater because of the big waves. He jumps, so it seems. After he jumped, he very slowly he turns himself and watches there where he is, and he sees the ship high up like a cliff, and he understands what he has done. He has jumped from the ship, he has abandoned the ship, and he cannot go back. He cannot return and save himself. After a few days, a small boat, few days, they arrive at a harbor. They're happy. We are safe. But as they enter the harbor, they see the partner. The ship had not sunk. The ship had been rescued by another ship, and it was safe. And so, with all the 800 pilgrims who could testify now that they had been abandoned by the sailors and the captain. The moment Jim sees the partner, he starts laughing. We can call this way of laughing sardonic laughter. Sardonic, the word comes from the masks used in Greek theater. Those masks looks like smiling, but they are horrible masks. So sardonic smile is the smile that is mocking at yourself. So he's smiling at the destiny. The destiny is played with him, and now he's condemned. What can you do? So this is the presentation and the analysis of Lord Jim. There will be some study questions about it. Thank you.